You're listening to the 204th edition of the Bitachon podcast. Today we're going to learn a passuk in chapter 112, verse 7 of Tehillim. Mishmor ra lo yira, nochen libay batuach b'Hashem. A person will see there's two different ways to understand the passuk, two different directions of understanding it. But let's just translate it simply. A person who trusts in Hashem, he's not afraid of bad news. His heart is set. His heart is very assured within him because he trusts and believes in Hashem. I'd like to read to you from the pasukim that surround this. This is chapter 112 of Tehillim, Kuf Yud Beis, Hallelujah. Ashrei ish yoreis Hashem. The chapter is a short chapter and speaks about the one who fears Hashem, the one who reveres Hashem. And as the Malbim explains, we're not talking about somebody who's living in fear of God, fear of sin, meaning we're not speaking of somebody who's afraid of the punishments, but rather we're speaking of someone who has yiras hara'imus, who reveres God's greatness. Such a person, he really desires Hashem's will. He really desires to do Hashem's commandments. And as the Malbim points out, the pasukim right before speak also about yiras Hashem. At the end of chapter 111, the beginning of wisdom is revering God. And a person who has that, a person who does it, so he has seichel tov, which means literally good intellect, good wisdom. But the Malbim explains that it means that a person has ruach hakodesh. A person who's in a place of revering Hashem is in a place of recognition of Hashem's will. Hashem manifests, makes things clear to that person that other people don't see and don't know. A person who's seeking after Hashem's will. That's what happens. Says passuk Beis of Kuf Yud Beis, Gibor ba'aretz yezarai. His children will be very strong and mighty in the land. Dor yisham yavoirach. A generation of righteous ones will be blessed. If we seek after what's right, so our children are going to see that. They're going to emulate that. He has all that he needs. He has prosperity. He has righteousness. It stands for him forever. He's aligned with Hashem. He's in a good space spiritually. Pasuk Daled, Zorach b'choshech or laisharim. God shines a light in the darkness for those who are straight. Chanun v'rachum etzadik. God is, it seems to me it's talking about Hashem. Hashem is gracious. Hashem is compassionate. Hashem is righteous. And this person is emulating Hashem. When we seek Hashem's will, we're looking for being godly. Toiv ish chaynin umalve. Interestingly, the passuk says, and we've spoken about this in the last few weeks, it's not just about trying to get what we want from Hashem, doing what's right. Yeah, that's true. We gotta do what's right. We can't ask Hashem for what we want. But it's also about a relationship with others. Being in the space of Bitachon means that I'm also doing kindness to others. I'm lending money. I'm doing that which is just, that which is right. Pasuk Vav. This person will never falter. Excuse me. His memory will last forever. This righteous person. And here's our passuk. I'm going to read till the end of the chapter as well. Mishmor ra lo yira. The person who's righteous, the person who's seeking to be like Hashem, who's trying to do what's right, who's trying to have a good relationship with others, who's doing kindness to others, this person is not afraid of any bad news. And we'll see that it can either mean that a person who has bitachon is not afraid, or it can also mean it's a promise. Hashem says, if you have bitachon, you don't have to be afraid. Nothing bad's going to happen to you. His heart is assured inside of him. He's completely faithful. He has full faith in Hashem. His heart depends on Hashem. He's not afraid. And that continues. That kind of attitude continues until he sees the downfall of his enemies. Pasuk Tes. He gives out money to the poor. He's not afraid. We've spoken about this in the past. A person who has bitachon is not afraid to give tzedakah to others. I don't feel so constricted if I'm living in a world of bitachon. Because I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever I give to somebody else, That's part of my relationship with Hashem. I'm going to have more. Karnei Torah b'chavod. His honor will be raised up. Passuk Yud finishes off, Rosh Hayir b'chas. The end of it all is that the person who is wicked, the person who doesn't have, I don't want to say that whoever doesn't have a relationship with Hashem is wicked, but maybe we could say that. A person who doesn't have that relationship, a person who doesn't have bitachon, a person who is far from Hashem, not seeking to do His will, doesn't care about other people. So he's going to see and he's going to be angered. Because the wicked person is trying to grab so much from life. He's trying to hold on to his money so that no one else will have it. So that he can have it and he can guarantee his future. But in the end, the tzaddik is the one who is dependent on Hashem. That's the one who is successful in the world. And it's a source of frustration for the wicked who tried so hard. Shinav yacharek v'namas. His teeth will melt, they'll fall out. Tavas Hashem tavid. The desire of the wicked will be lost. So, there's two paths in front of us, and it looks like the person who's grabby and tries to accomplish and tries to succeed, it looks like that person, does succeed, perhaps to a certain extent. It looks like the person who is laid back, the person who's depending on Hashem, maybe he's waiting for stuff to come to him, or maybe he's active, but it doesn't look like he's going to succeed. He's not grabbing enough. It's a dog-eat-dog world, right? That's what they say. And it comes out in the end, those are the two paths, but if I choose the path of righteousness, the path of charity, the path of goodness, and the path of trying to have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem, with God, so then, ultimately, the truth is that even the wicked will acknowledge that their path didn't work out well for them. Let's look together here. It brings here a Gemara in Brachos, which quotes our passuk. And it says like this, Hillel HaZaken was known for his tremendous bitachon. He had such awesome faith in Hashem. It's known that Shammai HaZaken, each day he would do something to honor Shabbos. He would buy something and say, wow, he found something really special. He'd buy it for Shabbos, and the next day he'd find something nicer. And he'd buy that and use the first item for the weekday. The third day he'd find something nicer and say, this is for Shabbos. Each day he'd do that until finally on Friday, he'd have the nicest thing for Shabbos. Hillel was different. Hillel would have bitachon. Then on Friday, he wouldn't start at the beginning of the week buying stuff. He would be always thinking, maybe, he'd be focused and he'd be recognizing that Hashem is going to provide him with exactly what he needs, exactly what he wants. To properly honor Shabbos. And he'd have bitachon on Friday, he would find that awesome, outstanding item that he would buy in order to have for Shabbos. So Hillel HaZaken was somebody who lived with bitachon, and his bitachon worked, so to speak. He lived in a space where he felt connected always to Hashem, and he knew that Hashem would provide him with all that he wanted and needed, really. So there was a story with Hillel. Now, that's just for some background about Hillel. But there's a story with Hillel Shaya Baba Derech. He came home. He had been on the road, and he came home. Shema Kol Tzavacha Ba'ir. He heard a crazy amount of screaming going on in the city. Didn't know who it was. He didn't know where it was from. He said, I'm absolutely positive that screaming is not coming from my house. There's no reason that someone would scream like that in my house. About this type of approach and awareness and assuredness, knowing for sure that screaming is not coming from his house. No situation could have occurred in his house that would have caused that kind of screaming. That's this passuk. The person who has bitachon, so he knows that nothing bad can happen. Nothing bad can happen to him. Amar Rava says, This passuk we can explain in two different directions. What does that mean? We said this earlier. It's a natural result. When a person works on bitachon, when a person is in a place where they really trust Hashem, so he's not afraid of any kind of negative negative news. There's no bad news in his world. It doesn't necessarily mean that nothing bad happens, but he doesn't get knocked over by it. You can also understand it in the other direction, that there's a promise that a person who has full bitachon in Hashem, Hashem promises them that they will never ever have anything bad happen to them. Nothing bad can happen in their lives. Tell me that the Gemara brings examples of this. There was a particular student, he was walking behind Rabbi Shmuel ber B'yosi, and they were in Jerusalem. They're walking through the shuk, they're walking through the market. Chazi de kamafchir. Rabbi Shmuel ber B'yosi saw that his student was afraid. Maybe there were some ruffians around, or there was something to be afraid of, perhaps, but he saw that he was afraid. Amar lech hatat. He said, "You're a sinner if you're afraid." Passuk says in Yeshaya, in Isaiah chapter 33, verse 14, the sinners were afraid in Sion. So he responded. The student said, "What's going on? What do you mean? How do you know that I'm a sinner? Just because I'm afraid? I'm afraid." You know, we find the passuk says in Mishlei, Perek Chavches, pasuk Yudalid, praiseworthy is the person who's always afraid. The person's not supposed to, you're allowed to be fearful. You gotta be on the lookout. Bad things can happen. So he responded and said, the teacher responded and said, no, it's talking about when it comes to the matters of spiritual matters, when it comes to keeping Hashem's Torah, I need to be afraid that I'm not doing it properly. I need to be afraid I'm not serving Hashem properly, but it doesn't mean that I need to walk around in fear that something's going to get me. I'm going to get hurt. That's not the correct attitude. He was explaining to him that's this very idea of this passuk. A person who is righteous, person who is a Yari Hashem, who fears Hashem, so they're not afraid. They don't walk around afraid. And if a person walks around afraid, so it shows that there's something missing in his relationship with Hashem. He doesn't feel protected. He doesn't feel safe. Yehuda bar Nasan was walking behind Rav Hamnuna, a great sage. Maybe it was his student as well. Asnach, he groaned. He made a sighing sound, a worried sound. Amar lei, Yisurim boy hahu gavra. Rav Hamnuna said to Yehuda bar Nasan, he said, what are you sighing about? What are you groaning about? Do you want to bring upon yourself some kind of difficulties in your life? Pasuk says in Eob, Ki b'chai b'charati, v'yasayeni, she'agarti yavayli. Quoted the pasuk in Eob, in Job, chapter 3, which says that Eob recognized that the negative situations he found himself in, the difficulties that came upon him, were a result of his fear. If we're fearful, if we express that fear, instead of having bitachon, instead of talking it out with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it doesn't mean that I can't be fearful. It means that I can't allow my fear to grip me and take hold of my consciousness, because that itself could cause the very thing that I fear to come. Again, the student said, hey, what about the passuk that says you're always supposed to be afraid? Again, it doesn't mean I'm supposed to walk around in fear. It means I have to be sure that I have to be afraid that I'm not keeping Hashem's Torah properly. It's very interesting, because where do I direct my fear? I direct my fear not towards the fact that someone might hurt me, not towards the fact that some financial calamity, heaven forbid, may occur to me, chas v'shalom. I direct my fear, maybe I'm not doing things correctly in my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem, with God. Maybe I'm not keeping His Torah properly. That's what I need to be afraid of. I need to be afraid that my bein adam l'chaver doesn't look like it's supposed to. My obligations to other people are not being met. I'm not giving enough charity. Maybe I might lose money because I'm not using my money in the right way, the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu prescribes for me. Maybe I'm not serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu properly, and my relationship with him is weak. And therefore, the blessings that come upon a person who has a good relationship with Hashem, maybe they won't come. Maybe they're not going to come because I'm weak. That's where I need to turn my mind. That's the focus that I need to have. The Ravid says, and explaining this Gemara, Mereishe l'Seifei Midrash, he explains what we said, why is it that a person doesn't have to be afraid of bad news? Because his actions are correct. And he has faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have Tachal Tzadik, Shein Tzarech Liyirah Midavarah. So this is a promise. This is a promise to the righteous individual. You don't have to be afraid of anything. No bad news is going to come into your life. If you're prepared, if your actions are correct, if you're having a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're prepared to show up in that relationship and say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm doing your will. And you have Bitachon. When we say the Reish Midrash, we can also understand the verse in the opposite order. Ein kan avtacha l'tzadik. It's not necessarily a promise to the righteous individual. This is what King David is saying. A person who has this appropriate faith in Hashem is not afraid of bad news. The bad news doesn't knock him over. The thing it doesn't affect him the way it affects other people. People get knocked down because they don't understand. I should speak about myself. I get knocked down because I don't understand that whatever happens to me is from him. It's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if something happens, it doesn't look good to me, but everything is from him. There's going to be some light at the other end of this tunnel. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu only wants the best for me. Hillel was beteach. You can really read this two different ways. He had faith in his chasidus, in his righteousness, that nothing would happen to him. Or it could mean, because of his righteousness, he had bitachon. He had faith that nothing bad would happen to him. And if anything bad happens, it's not going to be a terrible situation. There's a gra here which is a little bit difficult, so I'm going to skip it for now. We will come back to it. But I'd like to read to you from the Shnei Luchos Abris. He brings here, the Hiksha B'Sefer Tefillah L'Moshe brings here a question that's asked in the Sefer Tefillah L'Moshe. Heichis Nase Hillel Lemer Shemuftach She'ein Zed B'Teich B'Eisei. How did Hillel have the spiritual audacity, perhaps, or the audacity at all to say that I'm sure that nothing is happening in my house? No bad thing has happened in my house. There's no such thing as a person who's perfect, who never sins. So if a person sins, so sometimes things can happen in their life which are negative to clean off the sin. And even if it would have been possible for someone to be found without any sin, it doesn't make sense. He's praising himself. We know that Hillel was known for his great humility. Something sons need to understand in the story. Obviously, something's not adding up. It says the Shnei Luchos Abris an amazing thing, that Hillel had worked on himself. He had worked on his soul. He had worked on his emotions, that if something bad happened in his life, something that looked bad, he received it with a good countenance. He didn't view negative situations as so negative. He understood that everything from Hashem, everything is from Hashem, and everything is ultimately for my good. This is something that he taught to those in his household. Hillel and his family, they had practiced whenever anything bad happened in their lives, to receive it with equanimity. He didn't get knocked over by it. So if he heard screams and shrieks coming from a house, coming from the city, he knew. He said, I'm absolutely certain that those shrieks and those screams are not coming from my house. He wasn't saying that for sure nothing bad is happening in my house. He wasn't denying that there could be something bad that happens in his house. He was saying, it can't be that screaming and shrieking, that kind of response to something bad, he knew for sure that's not in his house. There's no sounds like that. That's not the response in his house to bad things going on. Because they had gotten used to and accustomed themselves and worked on receiving negative situations with a good heart, with an open heart perhaps. He says, Tuv Levov, with good heart. That's what the passuk means when it says that the person who is Bitach does not find himself in a state of fear. The hint here is that even if he hears bad tidings, he's not afraid of it, because he knows that this negative situation or this negative news that he heard is there to clean him off. He knows it's for his good. Thank you so much for listening. See you again next time.